September 1666. For over a year, England had been locked in a bitter war with the Dutch Republic. Great fleets clashed at sea, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. But on the home front, in the heart of London, a different kind of war was about to begin, a war of fire. It started in the dead of night, in a small bakery on Pudding Lane. A spark, a flame, a moment of carelessness. In a city built of timber and pitch, that was all it took. As dawn broke, a plume of smoke stained the London sky. At first, it was a distant curiosity, something to be remarked upon. But soon, the church bells began to ring, not in celebration, but in frantic, desperate alarm. The fire wasn't just a fire, it was a monster, and it was growing. The city itself was becoming a battlefield. The flames spread with astonishing speed, leaping from one timber-framed house to the next, defying the feeble attempts to stop it. The summer had been long and dry, turning London's narrow, crowded streets into a perfect tinderbox. A strong easterly wind fanned the blaze, pushing it westward, deeper into the city's core. Citizens who had been following news of naval battles were now faced with a more immediate enemy. Panic set in. The firefighting methods of the time were hopelessly outmatched. Lines of people passed leather buckets of water from the Thames, a futile gesture against an inferno that consumed entire blocks in minutes. The official response was slow and chaotic. Why? Because the nation's attention, its resources, and many of its able-bodied men were focused elsewhere on the war at sea. While the Royal Navy fought the Dutch fleet, London's heart was being burned out from within. The city descended into chaos. Streets once bustling with commerce were now choked with terrified families fleeing for their lives, their worldly possessions piled high on overburdened carts. The air grew thick with smoke and ash, turning day into an apocalyptic twilight. Amid the desperation, looters and opportunists saw their chance, preying on the abandoned homes of their neighbors. King Charles II ordered soldiers into the city, not just to fight the fire by demolishing buildings to create fire breaks, but to restore order and protect what little was left. The fire raged for 4 days, a relentless assault on the capital. When it was finally over, the scale of the devastation was unimaginable. More than 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, and iconic structures like St. Paul's Cathedral were reduced to smoldering ruins. London's economic and administrative systems were paralyzed. The Royal Exchange, the center of commerce, was gone. The Custom House, vital for collecting taxes to fund the war, was ashes. The catastrophe on the home front sent shock waves that were immediately felt in the war effort at sea. This was the strategic disaster England couldn't afford. The fire didn't just destroy homes, it crippled the very infrastructure supporting the war. The great naval dockyards, though mostly spared from the flames, suddenly found their supply chains cut. Payments to sailors and shipbuilders were delayed as the government's financial heart had ceased to beat. The production of ropes, sails, and provisions ground to a halt. Shipwrights and laborers were either homeless themselves or unable to get to work through the ruined city. At sea, naval commanders grew frustrated. Orders from the Admiralty were delayed. Ships in need of repair were stuck in port. The momentum England had gained in the war began to stall. Across the English Channel, the Dutch saw their opportunity. With the British reeling from this domestic catastrophe, the Dutch fleet could regroup and plan its next move, knowing its enemy was weakened, distracted, and fighting a war on two fronts. A city ablaze meant a war effort stalled. The Great Fire had changed everything. As the first light of dawn after the fire broke over the ruins, it revealed a scene of utter desolation. A vast, smoking wasteland where a vibrant city once stood. Weary citizens wandered through the rubble, their faces etched with loss and disbelief. Yet, even in this moment of despair, the spirit of resilience began to stir. Amidst the ashes, the work of clearing and rebuilding slowly began, but the war waited for no one. In the ports, the remaining ships of the Royal Navy were being readied for battle. The conflict with the Dutch was far from over. London, wounded and scarred, had to find the strength to support its fleet once more. The war raged on, but the city, and indeed the nation, would never be the same. From these ashes, a new London would eventually rise, but the memory of the Great Fire, a war fought not with cannons, but with flames, would be burned into its soul forever. Thanks for watching. If you want to see how England recovered to strike back at the Dutch, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for our next episode.